Welcome to Spirituality Live. I am Greg Campese, and I am here with
Sam Haynes, how are you?
welcome.
It's a really awesome topic today.
Yeah, today no guest because this was a topic that is very personal to me right now because of some specific things I'm going through, which I'll talk about. And this is also a topic that Sam is very versed in and deals with what him and Wendy do.
Yeah.
So that's why. So it was perfect. Didn't feel we needed anyone else to be a part of this, and so we're talking about confronting your wounds.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big one.
It is a big one.
This topic, of course, has so many potential directions to go very, very far down on. Today, we're going to do our best to skim the atmosphere of that general planet of the journey to healing.
Yeah.
Probably we have all had an experience in our lives where we've had to go through this process, and I'm sure we have all had someone in our lives who has gone through some severe tragedy, and it has huge effects. So we are also fielding questions today. We can see our comment feed. So please, as we're going through this, if you have any questions or if you want to make any comments, we're going to do our best as we're going through our show today to make space for that as well. So we would love to hear from you as well.
Yes. Yeah. So confronting your wounds. I don't like to compare things and what's more important than other things, but I mean this is honestly one of the most important topics and possibly the most important thing as human beings that we can look at and deal with, because it really is the key to our well-being emotionally and physically, and the key to our spiritual evolution. I mean, here we are, we're at Awaken Center for Human Evolution.
Right.
For humanity to evolve, it has to happen emotionally. It really does. Because everything really comes down to energy, and feeling is energy. How we feel really defines everything, our whole experience, and our interaction with other people. Like, it really does come down to feelings.
Part of that fabric of our humanity.
Yeah. So, and when you're wounded, when you're wounded physically, I mean, you very easily see the effects of it. When you're in pain physically, it's very obvious to you how that affects how you feel and how you interact with everything and everyone. And it is very obvious how other people interact with you, with physical wounds. But emotional wounds, we all have them. We all have them. I mean, let's face it, we come into this world clean slate, nothing at all.
Right.
And this isn't a judgment. We come into a wounded world.
Yes, we do.
I mean, that's just how it is. We come into a wounded world because we're all working on it, and that's the whole purpose. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's the whole purpose of life. Is we're here to grow, evolve, and come back to love, and the process of helping the world heal, helping humanity heal, and on our own journeys helping us heal. Like, that's really it. I mean, that's the key. That's the core for me.
Yeah.
And when it comes to awakening and evolving as a species, we can put lots of words to it. Like, I just made my acronym for Awaken. But it really comes down to, we need to heal our wounds to grow spiritually, and then to be able to help other people grow spiritually.
Yeah, that's well put.
Thank you.
So one of the blessings about our wounds is the very nature of wounds is that they heal. If I cut myself, when I have cut myself, I keep it clean, I bandage it to whatever degree the wound is, we treat it, right? If it's a paper cut, a Band-Aid will suffice, or some pressure for a few minutes will suffice. If it's a broken bone, the bone needs to be set. If it's something more serious than that, we have doctors, we have this wonderful Western medicine. Our saving life from physical wounds is amazing, it's fantastic. Wounds heal when treated well, and the same is true with our emotional, mental, and spiritual wounds. When we take the right steps to treat the wounds appropriately, healing happens. So assessment is one of the first things that we have to do. What's the nature of our wound? Where are we wounded? What can we do when we're wounded? Those are all some of the things that we'll talk about. But as you mentioned, physical wounds are obvious, right? A limp, a broken bone, a cut, blood, it's all very obvious. Many times we put a brave face on our sadnesses, we hide our angers, we tuck away the emotional pains. Certainly in the moment of wounding, and we're talking like big wounds, we're talking huge tragedies here, the capital traumas. We dissociate during those times as part of our survival mechanism. We have to, in order to psychologically survive the moment, we naturally dissociate. We suspend feeling. We go into shock.
Right.
We do this to survive.
Well, I'm going to interrupt because
Sure.
it's not just the big ones.
Right.
There are many subtle ways that we are wounded and we
Yeah.
do the same exact thing.
Yes, we do.
totally disassociate from a person or a conversation or something in a lot of ways.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
So
do.
it really does happen on every level, from the minor little ego bruising to the huge traumatic events.
That's entirely correct. So the example of the capital T's highlights the whole process. And yes, you're totally correct. We do this in all these little small tiny ways. I tell clients often, acknowledge your disappointments, because your disappointments are little mini heartbreaks. And when that happens and we tuck it away, the same thing happens with the small wounds as happens with the big ones, right? The pain or the fallout from that may not be as severe, but it's all these little pernicious things that we can fall into. So when we're wounded, we have this natural reflex, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual, to protect the wound. We hide, we tuck it away, we put this mask on. And it's not about being false, it's a survival piece. Where we get into trouble is when we, after the tragedy or the life-threatening situation has passed, and we're no longer in immediate danger, do we take the opportunity to process what happened to us and take the steps to resolve that pain? Oftentimes not for years, and sometimes never.
Yeah.
So that's where the wound persists, and that's where we can fall into one of the big traps, is identifying as the wounds. We can even go so far as to take that to its farthest sting and celebrate our woundedness, and that's a very dangerous thing too, because it can lead us to lift the idea of the wounded person up beyond what's really healthy and appropriate. The idea is to treat the wounds, not put it up here and leave it untouched. It needs to be dealt with. It needs to be faced. All those pieces take real care and real maintenance to take care of, and then life
Because
practice.
when you lifted it up like that, because then it's almost like oh, look at me, I'm broken, and it's like it's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, and so that falls into one of the ways that we can help is to acknowledge our pain. It's one thing to acknowledge our
Well,
pain.
hold on, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Don't yet.
Okay.
So Sam has a wonderful newsletter that he wrote with a lot of really good points about identifying your wounds and your pain and going through them. So we're gonna go through that list. But before we get to that, I wanna interject a little bit about myself. Can I make
love
it?
it, please.
So the reason this really hit me is because something shifted recently for me, literally with my skin, and I've been getting physical wounds all over my body, like little abrasions are turning into like big noticeable things. And I am finally seeing someone about this. We're going to make a little correction with, what supplements I want to be eating and all that. That's another whole talk. We'll have somebody on later to talk about keeping care of your body. But it came out of nowhere, and for me, so it was a very interesting and obvious process of how a very little wound, because my body wasn't in the state it needed to be healthy, turned into a little bigger wound, a little bigger wound, a little bigger wound, and it was because of the physical wounds that I'm getting are actually in areas that are easily irritated. Like right where like my waistband is, or my button, or like where my collar is, or something like that. So it's constantly being rubbed and irritated. So the physical wounds translated into a very poignant spiritual kind of knock on the head. So physically what was happening was I was getting little wounds that were getting irritated and getting bigger and bigger, to the point where it was painful. It was interrupting my life, interrupting, everything happening. And that is exactly what happens when we have emotional wounds, is something that seems possibly small and insignificant. And there's both types, like we said, because there's the huge things where there's an obvious trauma, like sexual abuse and things like that. So there's the big wounds like that. But then most, I would say probably every single person on the planet has childhood wounds.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. and those are the ones we really need to watch out for, because something like sexual abuse, not that it's easy in any way, but you know exactly what it is, so I think it's a little easier to deal directly with. And not that the process is easy, but you,
Sure.
you know what it is.
Right.
With the childhood wounds,
It gets attention and validation. Is that
no, my
you're
point is,
saying?
you know exactly what it is. Like somebody was
Okay.
had, like if someone was raped,
Right.
you know that's the trauma. If somebody comes back
Right.
from war, you know that's the trauma.
Right,
Like
okay.
you know what the trauma
I
is.
follow that.
Right.
Right.
So I at least it makes it a little more direct in approaching it.
That makes sense.
With the childhood wounds, most of the time we don't even know what they are, and we really have to look at ourselves and look back. Like we'll look at ourselves now and see what patterns we have now, because those patterns, those destructive patterns, and those wounded patterns
Right.
are the patterns that link back to childhood, and you got to try to look at and see like what's that from, and
Right.
just like the physical wounds that I have, where they're finally getting a little bigger, a little bigger, a little bigger, where it can become debilitating. The same thing happens with your childhood wounds. You have
Right.
something that could be somewhat insignificant at the time, but it left a wound,
Mm-hmm.
and because it was never looked at, like now as an adult, like I still haven't dealt with an emotional wound from when I was a child, and it's been with me the whole time, and just slowly getting a little bigger, where it's to the point where it's it could be crippling. Like it hasn't crippled me yet, but it's definitely caused a lot of problems and
Sure,
anxiety
sure.
in my life and to the people that love me.
Right.
So, and that's the other thing too. When you're wounded, you're not just halting your life in certain ways, but you're also causing problems for the other people in your life indirectly.
It can hold us back from participating fully in relationships, professional endeavors. It can create confusion, fatigue, lack of clarity. Yeah, it can have a whole shadow
Yeah.
effect on our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why it's for me this was a wake up call, because I know that I've had emotional things that I haven't dealt with, and I guess some part of me was like, well, they're not like that big enough or that important, or I didn't really pinpoint the root cause, so it was like I'll just kind of keep trucking along and keep sweeping them under the rug because it's okay, it's not that bad,
Keeps
like
us all safe.
it's not a
and
real
easy.
trauma, I'll be okay,
Right.
but it is, it's to the point where there's so many little things that I haven't dealt with, so many wounds under my belt that I have ignored and not really dug into and confronted and felt, and all the things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about, talk through how to deal with your wounds.
Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff that I've done on some levels, but I haven't done on other levels. Or there's certain wounds, like through my spiritual healing, through meditating and looking at things and journaling. There are some things that I have dealt with, but there's some other things that are still uncovered that I'm not looking at. Whether it's intentionally or subconsciously, there's just things that I still haven't really looked at and dug into.
Sure.
So thank you for my little rant. So
good.
so Sam has some awesome tools about identifying things and working through them, and that's what we're going to go into.
Cool. I've got some notes. I got up early this morning, wrote a lot of stuff down because there's so much to try and cover. I wanted to make sure I at least highlighted some things. It's so easy in the moment here talking to miss things, and there's some really important things here. So forgive me if I look down at some notes for a bit. You can't stop me anyhow. So
He's in deep thought.
I'm in deep
These
thought,
moments.
always. So we've covered some of the things of what it can look like when we have wounds, right? We can look so healthy and so good on the surface and be full of anxiety, full of all these things that we're feeling. I might feel something entirely different from what I'm being observed by others feeling, as has often been the case.
Right.
We
Yeah. So you have the people that are wounded and let everybody know, and then you have the people that are wounded and in complete denial, or and it kind of goes both ways, because they could just have buried it and in their subconscious and consciously, like, they're not even aware that they're hiding their wounds. And then you have the people that kind of know it's there, but do deliberately hide it and put on a beautiful front.
Right. And then there's also just the mask that we have to wear out in public, not because it's a falsehood to do that. It's just a matter of
just getting by.
Public isn't the place to take our deep, tragic, personal wounds.
Right.
We need a safe place. We need somewhere that we can legitimately feel safe, as opposed to having an illusion of safety. We have to have certain things in place to be able to heal. Just like when we're physically wounded, we need to be clean. We need to be safe, dry. We need to have food. We need to have coverings and bandaging, and then time. When we have emotional, mental, spiritual wounds, we need to go through a similar process. But some of the symptoms that I just wanted to highlight, and of course there's hundreds and thousands of them.
Yeah,
but
these are good.
Some
So
basic ones are
if
confusion.
if you're feeling emotionally wounded, or if someone else is emotionally wounded, these are some things they might be feeling.
They might be, right. Confusion, fatigue, lack of appetite, isolation, avoidance, misplaced emotional responses. This was one I didn't understand until my early 30s. I realized it suddenly clicked for me that what I was feeling in that moment, I think I was probably 31, I felt this deep sadness. And it wasn't a new feeling. I've been deeply sad most of my life. It clicked because life around me was great. I suddenly realized I was sad, and I couldn't figure out, but life is fantastic. There's nothing to be sad about. And it clicked.
I've been there.
I'm not feeling sad about now. I'm feeling sad about last year. And I slowly began to process all those feelings. And I realized that all the feelings I was having in the moment were largely from my past. Sometimes a week, sometimes a year ago, sometimes 15 years ago. And slowly over about 2 years of just feeling my emotions, reading books about the process of going from grief to grace, abandonment to healing, I just did all the work, little pieces each day, where after a couple years I was having emotional responses in the moment.
Yeah.
And it seems ridiculous almost to think, well, how could you not be having a feeling about right now? It's a thing. It's a real thing that you can actually have displaced or misplaced emotions, where something tragic happens, you might laugh instead. You might have the wrong emotional response to a certain trigger, right? That's because the wiring gets crossed in the minds. We become confused, and we persist and build a whole framework of cognitive reasoning from a wounded, confused place. So,
and the mind doesn't let go of the past very easily.
It doesn't. It doesn't. It retains.
So here we are in the present, but your mind is still in the past wound.
That's right. Yeah. The mental components, emotional components, it makes this fabric, right? We have the physical body, emotional body, mental body, and spiritual body. They're inseparable. So every experience hits us on all those levels. So as we go through the healing process, we have to visit each of those levels and consider our energy state in those places. What are we holding on to? What patterns are we persisting? And then it comes down to what emotional triggers have cemented certain behaviors and mental thoughts, judgment cycles, pattern thinking. We begin to think of ourselves as less than, as unworthy. We diminish ourselves when we are attacked, and we can persist in that over future attacks. We can even fall into taking on a projection during a physical abuse, sexual abuse, or other big shocking thing. We can take on a projection from the perpetrator on all those layers and wear it and internalize it and think that we're deserving of that treatment. And over long terms of abuse cycles, that person can become programmed to think of themselves as worthy and deserving, and then we can find those things later on in life.
And there's so this goes back to childhood, because there's so many of us that don't feel worthy on so many levels. There's so many people with just crushed self-confidence, either on a big level or a subtle level. It's both.
Right.
And that comes from our childhood and our upbringing, things that have happened, but that follows us all the way through. So then when other incidences occur, like there's patterns that follow us throughout our life, and when bigger traumas happen, it's very easy to get into that point of feeling like, well, I deserve this, or or I'm not good enough to be happy. And there's people that just accept that they live in pain and trauma, and that more bad things are going to keep happening to them because they don't have that self-confidence and that self-worth.
And we get normalized to it. It becomes familiar. So we don't often think to challenge it.
And you even have some people that don't want to let go of the pain because that's what they're used to, and they're afraid of what it actually looks like if they're happy.
Right.
They're really happy. Yeah. And I'm glad you also mentioned the whole point about being depressed and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I've always felt like there's some sadness in me that I haven't let go of, that I haven't figured out. And just like you were saying, it's that same feeling. It's like, my life is great. I had my little issues and traumas, going through school, growing up in like junior high and high school and stuff like that. But outside of that period in my life, I had a great childhood, and I've had a great adulthood.
Right.
Like I've had a wonderful life, wonderful jobs, just wonderful friends, so much
Right.
support and all that kind of stuff, like so much love around me and in my life. And yet there's still something that I haven't dealt with and let go of, that's still this deep sadness somewhere in there that, pulls me down a little here and there.
Right. True.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can happen. So yeah, the list of symptoms, negative self-talk, I think
Oh, yeah, that's a big
is
one.
part of where we're going. It goes along with low self-esteem. We talk ourselves into staying in that place of low self-esteem. Fantastical thinking is another trap that it is a symptom. It goes along with self-delusion, and we can create a sideline reality that has enough to do with this reality, or maybe goes unchallenged, or maybe it completely splits from reality, and we place ourselves in a world where certain things exist or can happen, where there's certain rules that make sense to what we've had to shift and take form of in order to survive. And it ranges from the very mild white lies we tell ourselves, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm good,
Right.
I'm all right, to the completely broke from reality schizophrenic dissociative disorders, which need serious dedicated support to treat.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always solve. You have to be willing to do certain things to get there, and not everyone makes it, unfortunately.
Right. So let's move on to ways to deal with your
Yes.
wounds.
So some positive healing actions. I put together 5 because it's a reasonable number. First one is acknowledge your pain.
Yeah.
Another way of saying it is honor your pain. There's nothing wrong
That's huge.
with your
Yeah.
pain. It's facing the reality that there is pain in your life,
Right.
and doing it from a place where you're not judging it. It's okay. It's okay that
Right.
you're hurting. It's okay that pain happens to you.
Yeah.
Facing the reality of it is one of the first crucial steps.
Yeah.
If you're in a state of denial,
Yeah.
there's nothing you or anybody else can do about your situation that's going to persist, and you're not going to have any power
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah, and that's huge. That's huge. You can't heal the pain if you're not admitting to the pain, if you're not
Right.
seeing the pain, if you're not accepting the pain or the wound. Because really a pain it comes from the wound.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a huge thing to be honest with yourself. And again, this goes back to whether it's something that happened more recently or something from your childhood, and this is where having a professional or just sitting in meditation with yourself. And when I say meditation, it doesn't have to be deep, eyes closed meditation. It can
Right.
just be meditative thought. Journaling is great,
Yeah.
but it's really about acknowledging what happened,
Yeah.
not trying to deny it, and
Mhm.
being okay with it. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be wounded. And when it already happened. I mean, that's the thing.
Right.
It already happened.
Yeah. You can't change fact.
Right. You're not changing it. So when you don't just accept it, then you're just causing yourself more pain.
Right. Yeah. Number 2 I have is connect with appropriate support systems. Sometimes that takes time to find the
Yeah.
right people to bring the skills to bear on the situation.
Right. And determining what works for you. Because for some people, a support system may be a book, or maybe
Or church.
church, or their peers, their friends,
Yeah.
their family, or a
Yeah.
professional, or connecting, meditating, connecting with your angels, your guides,
Yeah.
getting guidance from the other side. So, and you can do them all. Like there's not one way.
Right.
But it's so important to have some kind of support system.
Right. 2 of the crucial things about a support system is that it creates a safety for us, and it reinforces a safety. We can't heal. I'm going to make an I statement. I can't heal unless I feel safe. And see if that's true for yourself. So when there's safety around me, then I can get into the vulnerable place where my wound is, and I can begin to do all the cleanup work that goes along with that. The second thing that connecting with support system does is it challenges you, right? It's not about going unchallenged. We have to be challenged. You
Yeah.
have to be pushed forward.
Yeah.
It doesn't. How many of you had skin knees as kids, and your dad or mom or uncle, whoever, brings over the bottle of peroxide and pours it over, and it bubbles and it fuzzes.
That just happened yesterday. Sam fell on her scooter coming home from school and ripped her pants, big hole in her knee. Not as bloody as we've seen in the past. She's had some doozies, but scraping some blood, and that's exactly what I did. I was like, we gotta clean the wound and put some peroxide on it, and it's fun. It'll bubble. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And was she inviting it, or was she?
Oh, she's a pro
on a certain level.
No, she's a pro now.
She got experience.
Yeah, she's had enough scrapes that she's used to it. There were, and so now I want to bring this up. So this is a perfect example. I love how emotional reality manifests in physical reality, and that's the mirror. Physical reality is the mirror for us to really see what's happening when we're not getting on other levels. And it's a great way to correlate things, because it's very easy to understand physical things, and sometimes emotional things are a little fuzzier for people to grasp.
Or we can have these really complex mental constructs that we live in, and live right over top of the emotions and never delve into.
Right. So you fall, you scrape your knee, and it's bleeding. What happens if you ignore it? Not going to work out. And then people are like, "Hey, you're wounded. You're bleeding." No, it's fine. No, it's
a flesh
dripping.
wound.
Done. Yeah, it's just a flesh wound. It's dripping. You have blood. Like you should have that looked at. Oh, I'm okay. No, talk about denial, right? If you were in denial about a physical wound, you wouldn't get 10 steps, with people around you. But that's how silly it is. That's the correlation is if you had a scraped, bleeding knee and we're pretending like it didn't happen and trying to deny it and deny it to other people, people would think you're crazy. It really is ridiculous. And so we really have to get into that same state with the emotional wounds and treating them that way. And again, though, it's also not our fault to a point, because we grew up in a society where a lot of stuff is swept away, pushed under the rug.
Sure.
It's not okay to hurt. It's not okay to be emotional. It's not okay to cry. That was a huge way of living back in the day. Suck it up.
Right. Right.
And that's part of the society we grew in, and it depends on culture and where you are and all that kind of stuff. It's all different in your family, but so many of us grew up in that where it's just the suck it up and move on, and not allowing us to feel it, and emotionally. So that's why if we start treating things emotionally the way we treat them physically, we'd be much healthier.
I think so.
A lot quicker.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think if
little side rant there.
No, it's a good rant.
Yeah.
If we look at, or I've noticed the level of just general restaurant table conversation has elevated. By elevated, I mean where I'm hearing more conversations, and I'm participating in more conversations where we are delving into, as people were exploring more of these topics. I think a lot of the old scars and scabs have been ripped open in the last 30 years. For both good and bad effect. But the conversations that we need to be having.
The world really is awakening. Each younger generation, I believe, is more in touch with their emotions. We have little emojis, and our phones and all that stuff, and it's great. It's no coincidence that became such a popular thing, throwing little emojis into texting, because it's a way of expressing emotions that we didn't have before. So it's a beautiful way for young generations, for children, to easily express their emotions with a little face. This is how I'm feeling, sad face, or angry face. It's great that is allowed to progress, and it's become a normal thing now, and it's becoming more and more part of accepted culture to share your emotions.
Yes.
So
that's exactly.
Let us continue.
So number 3 goes right in. Feel your emotions.
Feel your emotions.
One of the really important things about feeling your emotions is to make space for it. You have to make space. You have to push away TV. You have to push away family. You might even have to push away self-care. Now the danger is pushing it so far that that we begin to neglect our lives, neglect ourselves, neglect our responsibilities.
Right. Everything's balance. You got to keep a balance, and you want to create a healthy space.
You do. Yeah. Part of that's boundaries. Asking for help. I've had to ask for help sometimes for years. I had help, support systems that help me deal with the daily stuff I needed to just take care of so that I could process all the heavy things that I was processing. Thank God it was there. It helped me by taking the load off.
Yeah.
And then we, as we grow and get stronger in process, we're supposed to take the load back on. It's not that we become this forever person who's carried through, right? We're challenged to grow back into power again, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the journey. The goal is health, and a healthy person is able to function and participate and carry and contribute. So at times we need to step away from those duties so that we can give ourselves energy and attention, because processing emotions is it takes energy, it takes time, it takes commitment.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge, I mean, I think that's actually the most important step. I mean, unless you're in denial, then that's the most important step. But assuming that you're well, here's the thing. Especially if you're ready to heal. If you're ready to heal, you've already said, okay, this is my pain. I'm done with it. I want to let it go. I want this wound to heal. So fully feeling the emotion, because again, you can't change the past. You're not going to change what happened.
Right.
So all you can do in this moment is fully confront and feel the emotions you're having around it, and then work through healthy steps of releasing it, dealing with it, whatever. That's the next part of it. But that's one of the things. Like I become a master at not fully feeling things and kind of just skirting by.
Sure.
Keeps my happy face on, and everybody thinks everything's good. But that's really what it is.
That's very common.
Yeah. And even with my meditating and my journaling that I've done, there's still some things that I have not really sat down and felt. And like I said, because there's some sadness still in there. I love my little sad emoji face. I throw that out a lot, and it's a hint that there's something in there that I haven't let go of, that I react sadly to things. Like for me, for me, my thing is my childhood wound, and what I realize, and this is a great word, because it's so easy to take on a feeling or put it on somebody else, like, oh, that person is this. I am depressed. That person is depressed. Right. That person's angry, or I'm angry, right?
Right.
And part of this, I think, is really changing our self-talk, right? Because you are not angry, you're just feeling angry. So it's important to understand that this is just something you're feeling. So, and I think that's part of the healing process, is
Absolutely.
Because so many people, they just identify with, I'm hurt, I'm wounded, I'm no good. You're not wounded, you just feel wounded because of something that happened. And the other thing that hit me that was really important from a word choice standpoint is, so when we have a wound and we take on something, we then carry that energy, and the word is carry. So it's, I'm not sad, I'm not depressed, I am carrying the energy of sadness and the energy of depression because of something that happened. Right. And even the wound. So for me, I really need to look at what I'm still carrying, what childhood wound I'm still carrying, because what comes out in certain times, which most people that know me don't see, but Sue probably sees all the time because she's behind the scenes with me, is the wounded child. There's so many ways where whatever I say, how I react to something, is a wounded child. It's coming out that way. But I need to stop. I need to not get into the mindset of I'm a wounded child. It's I'm carrying the energy. I'm still carrying the energy of wounded child. Yeah. And if you're carrying something, you can let it go. And we'll get to that.
A beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
Very well put. I like that. Part of feeling emotions, to round it out, is in our support networks that we have, it's important to have support that doesn't get enmeshed in our feelings, right? We need to be able to go fully in. Others around us need to be able to stay objective and allow us the space to go in. I do men's work with the group locally, and new men will come into our group sometimes, and a man will be doing a deep piece of processing, and a man might start crying, like snot coming out of his face, really true, deep, core, painful crying. And sometimes there's a man who's new to it, who the first instinct is to want to go over, grab a tissue, and go and comfort the person. And we stop that man from intruding upon that man's process. The man who's there crying in his process. If a hand is placed on him, if he's given a tissue, if he's interrupted, it breaks the connection that he has worked so hard to finally get down to that emotion. The cleanup can happen later. You can wipe your nose off later. You can, what fluids can be cleaned up.
Right. Right.
Let the man process.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
support
And
that is strong enough to be able to witness painful, uncomfortable emotions
yeah,
and not intrude,
hold
but
the
keep
space.
that safe space. That's the level of support
Yeah.
that needs to be built around the big capital T's, and even the ones that the smaller T's that just need that kind of release.
Yeah.
So
And
it's about mature support, emotional support around us, so that we can become mature in the emotion that we've been carrying with ourselves.
yeah, and we were talking about this a little bit before we went on, and said we could do a whole episode just on how do you
Right.
handle and care and manage somebody that's in a wounded space,
Yeah.
because exactly what Sam's saying, and going back to, like I was saying, like that age old, like, suck it up,
Right.
real men don't cry, whatever it is,
Real
move
men
on.
do cry.
Right.
Say that.
Right, real men do cry. All people cry.
People cry.
Doesn't matter what you look like, who you are, where you came from. It's important. Like crying, there's a reason that it was put into our being
right.
to be used.
We have the capacity.
It's letting go. It's releasing. It's feeling. And when you stop somebody from crying, from feeling, from releasing, like, it's funny how uncomfortable other people get when someone else is actually feeling, because they're not comfortable with feeling. So there are people that will try to stop you from feeling, whether it's again subconscious or consciously. It happens all the time, and it could be your parents, it could be your friends, and like you're trying to actually feel something and work through it and let it out, and it's like, oh, it's okay, don't cry. Like, how many times have people heard that? So feel it, cry, let it out. Let them become the biggest mess they can, sobbing on the floor, snot dripping, tears all over their clothes. Awesome. Wonderful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. That needs to happen. It needs to happen so much more in our world, and especially with men. And I don't like saying that kind of stuff, but it's just true. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of guys that need to know it's okay to just completely break down and let it all out.
Yeah. It's vital.
Yeah. Moving on.
So the next one, after we've felt and let all this out, we're all cleaned up, then that energy is purged, we can begin to understand our pain. We can look at the fact,
right,
more honestly, right? Because the whole goal is in clearing all this up, is to understand, back to reality. Because within reality is where our vitality belongs. Our vitality doesn't belong in delusion. Our vitality doesn't belong.
Our vitality belongs in our reality.
It does.
Yeah.
So that's the goal. So part of that goal is to get to the place of understanding. So after we've purged whatever feelings have been overwhelming us and keeping us from moving out of the wounded moment, understanding can happen.
Yeah, and from a wounded spot, you're reacting from the wound or defending yourself in so many ways. So there's a lot of just not being honest and authentic when you're coming from the wound. So once you identify it and create your space and feel it, then it's like you I don't know, I don't even have the right word, but like,
sure. Well, the brain opens up,
and
the details that have been buried can come forward. And sometimes you don't need the details. Sometimes it's not so much about understanding the who, what, where, when, why. Sometimes we have that, and that's okay. Sometimes we just have the fact of our pain, and accepting that, making that okay, making room for it, processing it, and understanding that our life is big enough. I'm big enough for all the things that I feel. This is something I actually got to feel and grow into recently. I used to feel like I couldn't be sad and happy at the same time, or angry and joyful at the same time. And
it's a funny thing.
It's a funny thing. And then realizing that I am big enough to feel all those at the same time and be okay. I can be present. And so for me, okay looks like being present, being able to listen, being able to participate in my life when I have emotions that are very strong.
And I realized
something I had to work towards.
Yeah, I realized what I was trying to say was when you feel it, like once you're through the feeling, it releases the charge around it.
Right.
And then that's not blocking you, and you release the charge and the reaction around it.
Yeah.
And then from a conscious present point, you can really look at what actually happened, look at all sides, and understand it from different perspectives.
Right. And then forgive.
And then
You can get some
forgive.
perspective on our lives,
Yeah,
perspective
forgive.
on ourselves, but also perspective on the perpetrators or the
Yeah.
other people involved in the things that we're
Yeah.
had been so charged about. And when
Yeah.
we have perspective,
And it's so
clarity
important,
follows.
right? It's so important to understand that when somebody does something that hurts you, it is about their pain. And that's where forgiveness comes in, because some people,
Yeah.
they're like, I can never forgive that person, I can never forgive
Right.
that person, you know.
Right.
The way you forgive someone else is realize that they're hurt and they're coming from their pain, and if they had love they wouldn't have hurt other people, you know. And they're that's and it's not about right or wrong, it's just this is how they're allowing their own pain to now be projected and manifested into the world,
Right.
and you just happen to be in their path. And
That's right.
and this is one of the hardest things for people to understand, but believe me that it is all part of the divine plan. It is not always pretty, but it does happen for a reason, for your growth and for theirs and for others. But the best thing you can do is forgive yourself, because it's not your fault. It's nothing's ever our fault. Like we're just going through our life, and we're energetically placed into certain places and
Yeah.
and with people and in situations for our growth. And
Yeah.
the wounding and the pain and overcoming that and moving through it is what helps us grow. And that's why we are here to grow.
It's a key component. So the fifth one, catharsis, that is, in a certain way, it's a death to self. It's a rebirth. It's a purging of the things inside of us that have been toxic within us. So to move fully into being whole again, we have to let go of something. We have to let go of our identity as a victim, our identity as the wounded one, right? It's vital. I cannot heal without pulling a splinter or setting the bone. I can't heal emotionally or mentally. I can't fix the mental image I have about myself in the world unless I'm willing to let it go and look with new eyes, fresh eyes, purged eyes. Let go of seeing myself as a victim, like letting go of needing to be a victim. Victims are disempowered people. And
Yeah.
when I see myself as
What's
a
it dis-
victim, I disempower myself.
Right. It's a disempowering train of thought.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
And so as we identify as victims, we disempower ourselves and we await others to save us. And the danger of living as a victim is that we stagnate in life, or we regress in life, and we put an undue burden on those around us.
Yeah.
And the more crucial thing for ourselves personally is we're not healing. We're not facing the reality of our wound in our lives. And so we're living an unfulfilled life. There's so much there on the table we're just not even reaching for, because we're not allowing ourselves to consider ourselves that we can reach for it.
Yeah. And there's certain words like victim that, you know, because there's so much energy around it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, from experiences and as a society, that, you know, as soon as you say the word, label somebody the word, there's just so much stigmatism energy that goes to it, you know. And, you know, but that's the word we have, right? But here's the thing to understand, and this is, I think, an important thing to grasp, is if something bad happens to you, right? If you're wounded in some way from some experience, in that moment you might be a victim, but as soon as it is done, you're not a victim anymore. Because again, it's in the past.
Right.
The second you are out of that situation, you're not a victim.
Right.
And some people might like disagree because like they're holding on to that victim mentality,
Mm-hmm.
but we're trying to take a higher road. We're really trying to understand that in the present moment, you might have been victimized in the past, but right now it is up to you whether you are still a victim. And in this moment, you are not a victim.
Right.
It really is true.
So I love that statement. It's very important to honor that distinction. And then so I learned a way of looking at it a few years back. I could be the target of someone, but I never have to be their victim. Victim is a choice I make within myself. When we're young, we don't know these things, and so we're so much more passive in the way that we deal with the world. As kids, we just take it all in. As babies, our whole job, our whole nature as babies is to take it in. So depending when the targeting or the victimization or the attacks happen to us, we have different levels of maturity and defensive strength to be at it with. So if it happens very young and a cycle gets perpetuated young, it gets in before those strengths develop. And so it sets up a whole different plot arc for what our life might have to endure when it comes in. You know, if someone came at me now with what had happened, 25, 30 years, it would just bounce off of me. I just don't care anymore the way that I used to. I've developed boundaries. I've developed an understanding, a vision of myself that's so well established, I don't give anybody else the power to displace me from it.
Right.
Yeah. And it might feel very rough and tough and perhaps overly insensitive to certain people in certain states when they're asking certain things of me that I'm not willing to give. I'm just not willing to give those things, and you can't make me. It's not because I don't care. It's
Right.
just I'm not willing to give what you're asking. Does it
Yeah.
make me a bad guy? No. Does it make me a bad guy in their eyes? That's up to them. And I choose not to, take that on. So there's a whole level to this as well. One of the things I had wanted to mention as well is when we are someone else's support, or when we're on the outside of someone else's pain looking in, how can we be with ourselves in a way that is honest and loving and sincere? And what kind of help can we assess that we can give this person? Sometimes it's a challenge, and sometimes that challenge is met with a spit in the face. No, get out of here! You don't care. And we have to accept that that's their response to that, and then live with that boundary. Sometimes it's rolling up our sleeves and getting in alongside them for a while and helping them through the daily grind as they work with themselves and get themselves back through. It comes down to who they are, what the relationship is, what you have to give, what's going on in your life. It doesn't serve yourself, society, or that person to give so much that you then fall apart, because now other people have to rush in and save you. So it becomes a system of systems of people working together to create health or to create distress, right? God gave us free will. Whether you believe in God or not, we have free will. So we have an equal capacity for tremendous glory and compassion and love and higher level reasoning. We have an equal capacity for self-destruction and mutual annihilation. And God leads us to it. We are left alone to that choice. What are you going to choose? Are you going to choose love, or are you going to choose hate? Are you going to get enmeshed in aggression and anger and unresolved energies? Or are you going to face maturity, own these things, look at these things within yourself, master these things within your own being, and then look at the world and go, all right, how do I want to be here? Do I want to add to that energy of hatred and vitriol that's so easy and always prevalent, no matter who's president? Anything, ever, that people are at odds. And you can either face it with maturity and reason and process your feelings and process your thoughts and participate in the community, having a conversation at a higher level, or do we jump in and do we brawl? Those are the options. Do we heal, or do we not? It's a pretty binary world in that way.
It's true. It's true.
And it's just the facts.
Yeah.
And the facts are beautiful because the facts can set us free. It can help us to get clear with reality, so we can actually put our vitality where it's meant to be and where it can be most effective.
Yeah.
And when we show up together with each other towards that goal of healing and clear-mindedness, we can challenge and support each other, which is where society can really benefit from all of these awarenesses that we're trying to grow here.
Yeah, and that's why this is so important. It's overcoming your wounds, dealing with them, confronting them, moving through them. It's going to bring you to such a beautiful, healthy, balanced state, and then you can bring that into the world and watch what it does. It's such a beautiful thing. And so like there's triggers in the world. There's people out there that are just huge triggers, but it's all on you. It's all on you, how you react, and whether you allow yourself to be triggered. If you're being triggered, it's because you have a wound. It really has nothing to do with the other person. Someone can be a total asshole, and they may not change. They may change. You can support a space to allow them to change. But if they don't change, that's just the way it is. That's just reality.
Yeah.
Someone may not change. So you have the choice of whether you want to change. You have the choice of how you want to allow that person to affect your life and how you want to affect that person's life.
That's right.
It's huge. It's huge. And so many people just get, again, caught up in the triggers, and they're really just making themselves a victim. They really are.
That's it. Yeah, and it can be an addiction. we can be addicted to that adrenaline ride, to that conflict. I mean,
Yeah.
it took me several years, but I realized back in my 20s that I was addicted to chaos. Not crazy, anarchistic, burn down houses chaos, but just disruptions, emotional disruptions, a certain level of pain in my life. I
Yeah.
needed that was my normal, and I needed to maintain that normal. And so I picked people who would help me create certain levels of chaotic, unreliable situations where I was always in a certain amount of pain. And thank God I got past that.
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
So those are traps that we can fall into during recovery. Codependency is what I'm talking about. In my pain, in my woundedness, I found other people whose wounds complemented mine. That's the definition, or is my understanding of codependency, having lived in it. I picked people whose wounds reinforced mine, right? Maybe not the same wound, but the complementary piece where we could then support each other in not growing. And what all that creates is a pattern where I keep recreating my wounds. And so there's a grace in that we cannot escape our pain. We have to.
Our pain.
We have to deal with it.
We cannot.
It all comes down to whether we face it, accept it, we can grow from it, or not.
Yes.
It comes back to the binary thing.
Very well
Which do you
said.
choose? Thanks.
Very well said. And so finally.
Yeah, so getting towards conclusion, and we would be happy to have any comments or questions. Just keep in mind there's like a 20-second delay between us speaking and then it
And the
coming
stream.
through on the screen. So if you type in things and it takes us a bit to get to you, understand that there is a bit of delay in the system here. Willingness to let go. I want to change. I want to make these changes. I don't want to be in this state of pain anymore. I want to feel it. I want to go through this process. Learning to let go. There's so many little shifts that have to happen. What are some of the things that you've had to let go in your life that you would?
It's a big question.
To name a
man.
few.
I don't
To name a
even
few.
know. I don't even know.
Um,
There, sarcasm. Like
Yeah.
I used to be so sarcastic, like ridiculously sarcastic, and I got such a kick out of it because I thought it was funny. Other people thought it was
Right.
funny, and that's the thing because other people think it's funny too, And I mean, it's sarcasm. The one thing I love about sarcasm, I still have a little sarcasm. It's you gotta lighten up a little. You gotta lighten up a little bit. But there is a
Yeah.
total difference between like a playful sarcasm and just a really rude, disrespectful sarcasm.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah, there is.
Not that I was ever like to the point where I was like deliberately hurting people's feelings with my sarcasm, but it was a deflection.
Yes.
Like me being sarcastic and being funny and throwing like little funny comments in was a huge way of me deflecting actually being serious, feeling emotions, feeling someone else's emotions, and
Yeah.
dealing with things in a mature way. And so that was one of the biggest things that I noticed that I remember that
Yeah.
when I got into my spiritual path and started doing the work, that was one of those things that, and both consciously and unconsciously, it just started going away, and I became less sarcastic and more present and authentic with my conversations with people.
And you're still funny. You're entertaining.
Just kidding. Yes. Well, there's a difference. You can retain your humor, and it doesn't have to be sarcastic and biting at somebody else.
That's right.
I was pinching your
I got that. Really?
humor. So the other thing, so that was something with my personality that I definitely saw a shift with. The other thing that was a big shift with me letting go of some of the pain and things that I was going through and some of the traumas and embracing my spiritual life was stopping drinking. Yeah. I mean, I will, on rare occasions, like out with my friends, maybe have like a beer or cider, because cider actually tastes good to me.
It does.
And beer does not. But not just drinking to just be in this altered state and to, like, not that, I mean, I had a very good life, so I didn't have problems I needed to drink away. But it was part of being wrapped up in, well, everyone else is drinking, I should be drinking, and part of it was also just wrapped up in that like carefree, like, oh, I'm gonna get drunk and
Feels good.
yeah, and
To a
whatever.
point.
But I did, at some point it was like, you know what, I don't need the alcohol to be in that happy state,
Right.
And the more I got into all the spirituality and embracing my spirituality, the more I didn't like being in any kind of altered state or altered consciousness.
Yeah.
Especially for a long period of time like that. So it just naturally dropped away.
I love sobriety.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was never a alcoholic in the classical sense, but I drank more than I was, would have been healthy.
Right.
Useful more
We
than
had our fair share
needed
of
to.
drinking more than was healthy. That's our
Yeah,
great.
yeah, and I really enjoy sobriety.
Yeah.
I'm happier.
Yeah.
I'm more stable and balanced. I'm consistent.
Cool. What are some things that you've let go of on your path?
Sure. My negative self-image, stories about myself that
That's big.
that
That's huge.
I don't belong. Right. I don't belong. Nothing. There's enough for everyone in the world except me. I was the exception. I was special. That was my specialness. Is that everyone else can have their toys, and this is from childhood. I grew up playing with sticks. We were so poor. We had no money for anything except food. And sometimes people brought us baskets of food from church. It was embarrassing, but true. And I grew up playing with sticks while other friends had really cool things.
You might have felt it was embarrassing. It's not embarrassing.
Right.
It's
that was a judgment that I had
Right.
at the time.
Right.
Was I was embarrassed that we weren't able to take care of ourselves.
Right. And that's an important point. I want to interject that, this is where a lot of the healing begins, because for a lot of us that don't have very significant, obvious wounds, it's the subtle things that are getting them away.
Right.
And it's important to start looking at the way we speak when we talk about ourselves and our life, and especially our past and our childhood and all that kind of stuff. And that's what I was talking about earlier, about making that shift where you're not taking on that.
Right.
And it's not, if you, and here's the thing. So as a child, you have no power over what is happening with the greater family whole, because you're not making money. You can't just run out and, here's $1,000 I had in my bank account, Mom.
Yeah.
So as a child, you're at the mercy of the situation that your family is in.
Us.
Right.
Yeah.
So especially as a child, however you grew up, that's just how it was. So nothing about it was your fault. Nothing about it was, and again, it comes out to how we perceive it. So in reality, there's nothing embarrassing about being poor. It's just how it is.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that are poor. And no matter how poor you are, there's probably somewhere someone else is poorer and has it worse, and someone's going to be richer, So again, like it's watching those judgments,
And that's part of the challenging aspect. That's a great example of how people can challenge each other. It might be like a word copying thing.
Yeah.
Where you just call out language and say, do you want to own that differently? Do you want to let that go?
Right.
Do you want to check in with the relationship you have with what you just said?
Right. So if you need help, it's even financially, like going to a food bank or something like that, it's okay. Yeah. What judgments are you placing on it?
Right.
So
that's some of the stuff I've had to let go of, to realize there is enough for me. There's plenty to go around for everybody. And I used to fall in that trap of thinking rich people, those rich people have it too easy, and they should give me some of that. Well, maybe I should get out of my own way and make better decisions in my life so I can go join them. And that's part of the challenge too. So I had to let go of a lot of the stories I had, not about just myself, but the world and the rules of the world in general. Yeah. I was very ignorant in a lot of ways about how to have money, how to even be in the world. And I'm still learning. I'm going to learn till the day I die, hopefully.
Yeah, but that's a huge...
Those are some of the huge core things that I had my way that were displacing my power entirely.
Yeah, yeah. That's a huge part of letting go. It's really about letting go of beliefs.
It's a big part of it, yeah.
And I don't mean like big beliefs like, is God real? I'm talking about what we believe about ourselves, our family, our society, like that kind of belief, that thought that we create and then hold on to. That's part of the wounding, is, the I am a victim, I am poor, I am not worthy.
Right.
So part of it, which we didn't mention, is creating new beliefs and instilling those in us and creating mantras.
Right.
So a great part of the process is when you feel and look at and discover a core wound, like I'm not good enough. So replace that with the opposite mantra, I am good enough, I am worthy. Right. Write it down, put it on a sticky note, put it on your mirror or whatever, on your computer, put it around. Now that's not going to just magically fix everything. It certainly helps.
It takes practice.
And this is a combination of things, right? It's a combination of things, because if you haven't done the work to look at the wound and the pain and all that kind of stuff,
Right.
a little sticky note, is only going to do so much. But it
Right.
all helps.
Right.
It all helps. It's a whole
That's right.
process, and it's going to be different for everyone. Like, there's going to be some things that are the same, but the process itself is going to look different for all of us. How you confront your wounds, accept your wounds,
Right.
move through your wounds.
Right.
It's very personal.
Yeah.
It's very personal.
And there's some universal aspects. We're all humans. We're all the same animal, right? We have different details, different psychologies, different temperaments, different experiences. But largely, by and large, the process is the same, right? What works for me on a fundamental level, process-wise, will very likely support you. It might look differently going through
Right.
it, but some of the things, some affirmative perspectives. Face life with your eyes open. Be willing to let go of your judgments. Be willing to discover the real and living natural world that you are an integral part of. There's a reality. You're in it. Check it out. It's really, really positive. There's so much potential there. Be willing to release false identities that you've taken on. Be willing to challenge the lies, both those we tell ourselves and those that others tell us. Right? The media, there's all kinds of, there's tons and tons and tons of falsehood out there. So apply some critical thinking, apply some time. Be patient and be honest. Those are some pretty universal things upon reflection that I found. Maybe you have some of your own. So, Greg,
Yeah.
in closing, is there anything that we've touched upon that you feel has been left unsaid?
I think we did a bang up job. I
We
think
did pretty good
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Wendy has
this
a
was
comment.
great.
There's
And
a comment over here.
So
Lean in.
let's just read through again really quick. Just to wrap it all up and sum it back up. Types of wounds. There's physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual wounds, right? People that are struggling with wounds and mental disorders, some symptoms are confusion, fatigue, lack of appetite, isolation, avoidance, misplaced emotional responses, lack of proper self-care, negative self-talk, fantastical thinking and self-delusion, and exaggerated or muted responses. And then positive healing actions. I'll let you.
Thanks. So some positive healing actions. Acknowledge your pain. Connect with the appropriate support systems. Feel your emotions. Understand your pain and catharsis. Let go of the identity of being a victim and take on the identity of being who you are, who you really are. Discover that.
Being whole.
Being whole. Yeah, be your own hero. So, Greg.
And avoid traps.
Oh, and avoid avoid the many traps. Be aware. Be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of your thoughts. Be aware of your self-talk. Be aware of what people are saying. Be aware of what's going on. Question it reasonably. It's important. It's important to at some point settle on things, try things out, and be willing to be wrong. Take a risk. But keep moving.
Yeah. And finally,
let go.
Let go.
Let it go. As Elsa so wisely tells us.
Let it go. Song will
So-
forever be sung.
So, Greg,
Yeah.
what are some ways that awaken? What kind of supports does
I'm
awaken
glad
offer?
you asked. So, one of my favorite events that we have here at the center that I feel is one of the most powerful events is the talking stick circle. Because all it is you come and one person at a time you talk and you share. And it is huge. It is huge. If there's and anything weighing on you, from the smallest little thing that's bothering you to the biggest, deepest wound, we create the space. And it's run by Carla. She does an incredible job of setting the space, setting the intention, setting the energy for people to come together and share. And it came out of her being an addict and 12-step program and all that kind of stuff. And she wanted to continue it for people on every level, whether you're, outside of an addiction, just for everyone to be able to have a space where they can open up, they can share, they can express, they can feel fully and be fully supported without being interrupted by anyone else, just for you to have that moment. And it's beautiful. It's awesome. And the Talking Stick Circle, Speak Your Truth, is the first Sunday evening of each month and the third Thursday evening of each month. And just always check the Awaken website, awakenche.org, for that. And then we also have pranic healing nights, energy healing, and right now, and that's run by Allison, and right now she's specifically calling it Feel Better because it's about using energy healing to help with these kinds of wounds and bringing them up and processing it and getting you through them. So there's beautiful supports, and then we even have spiritual support one-on-one in groups. There's healers. There's readers to help. There's everything we do here is to help you work through your pain and evolve. It really is.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So many ways. So many ways. Yeah.
Wendy Rose and I, you can find us online at wendyrose.com. Wendy with an I. She always puts little hearts over it. It's cute. We offer a range of services, everything from life coaching, we call it integrated life coaching. It incorporates so many experiential tools to help people look at their lives, assess their lives, see what's going on, find clarity, find understanding. We have this brilliant program that Wendy authored years ago. It's called the Inner Child Reconnection Program, and it's geared directly towards looking at our childhoods at each developmental stage, and go through a process where any blockages, any traumatic wounds, anything that's holding us back at each level can be energetically cleared, processed, and then that age level, the identity, that part of ourselves that was dissociated through that experience can be reintegrated safely back into ourselves and begin to grow and move forward. And we've been working with that for about 7 years with clients and experienced tremendous healings for clients, both in alleviating long-term physical pain, that after the emotional root of that pain was processed and resolved, the physical component went away. So the person's not on pain meds anymore and hasn't had an interrupted night of sleep from that since, and that was years ago with that relapse. It's not always about re-experiencing the trauma either. I want to make that clear. It's not about triggering the pain. It's about safely creating an environment where the energy of the self can be discovered in a new way. And it often is objectively witnessing elements of the trauma story. It's always done in a safe way, and the client feels safe and nurtured through the whole process. We've never had a client who faced something they weren't able to safely handle and manage with the responsibilities of their lives. We also have IET, which is integrated energy therapy, and Peace Rose Healing, which are two energy modalities which are really fantastic at helping us release the emotional blockages, the emotional, mental, and spiritual energies that we have that help to create the patterns and situations of our lives that are persisting from the wounds. We can disentangle those energies, those energetic systems, so that we can release those thoughts, change our thinking, change the reality, but also change our emotional state. We can change our emotional filter so that where we couldn't allow love in, we can now begin to let love in and grow with the experiences from a broader, healthier, full human range, as opposed to minimizing the pieces and all the little managing that can happen from coping with woundedness. So if you want to learn more about that, visit wendyrose.com. And look forward to hearing
and I almost and I almost forgot at Awaken we also have an in-house counselor. She's here usually on days I'm not here, so she's not always in the forefront of my mind. Her name's Bree. She's awesome. She's amazing. She does NET and EFT. And honestly, I'm not that familiar with NET. I do want to learn a little bit more about it. EFT is tapping, and tapping is an incredible process to release. Because when we have these wounds, when we have these beliefs, when we have traumas, not only are we holding on to them mentally, it literally, the energy gets stuck into our body and ourselves. And EFT is a great way of confronting the issue that you have, and the tapping helps release it from the body, from physically, and from the energy field, and can create huge shifts in people's lives. I've seen it happen. There's a Tapping World Summit each year, and I think it just happened. So anyway, so Bree does that too. So if you're looking for help, please reach out, contact me, contact Sam, stop by the center, stop by the Awaken website, awakenche.org, and see what's happening here at the center. And Awaken is also a directory and event calendar, so you can also look and see what other events are happening in the area, and go on the directory and find hundreds, if not thousands, of amazing people in the area that can help you. So help is all around.
And it's not just our area. That there's
Yeah.
there's people from all
All
over who post services
Yes.
and events.
Yes, because the
on the
beautiful
weekend.
the beautiful thing too is that a lot of people can work remotely. You don't
Right.
necessarily have to be in person. It's nice.
That's
I
true
think
for
it's
us
very
as well,
nice.
yeah.
But you can work remotely. Just phone call, video chat, remote energy healing. There's a lot of ways
Yep.
to work with people.
Yep, all of our
So,
services can be offered remotely as well.
Yeah. So thank you. This was definitely a little
I'm
bit of
gonna
a
scroll through, make sure I'm not missing
see
any
if
questions
we
here.
miss any questions. This was definitely a little bit of a longer show, but this was just such a huge topic that we really wanted to tackle fully, and appreciate all the people that tuned in to listen.
Do you have?
And appreciate Sam's head here.
There you go.
So we really appreciate everyone that tuned in, and we're gonna repost this on Awaken's YouTube channel, youtube.com/awakenche, and
Yeah.
and I'll put it on the Awaken Facebook page as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's about it.
I'm good. Thanks
Yeah.
so much for joining us today.
Thank
I
you
see
so much.
so many
And-
people on these lists. It's
Yeah.
really great to have you all here. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
Greg, thanks
And-
for putting this together today.
Absolutely. And we both wish you
Yeah.
well and so much love on your journey of healing.
Yeah.
Look at your wounds, feel them, confront them, let them go.
You deserve to have the life that you want.
You do.
It's
you,
possible.
You deserve to be happy. You deserve to feel good. You deserve
Yeah.
to get back to who you really are. And the wounds stop that, prevents us from really being ourselves. And there's a beautiful, beautiful, amazing world waiting for all of us to experience once we let go of all the shit that's stopping us.
Yeah.
Because we're the only ones doing it to ourselves. We really are the only ones doing it to ourselves. Someone can physically or emotionally poke at us, but
Yeah.
we're the only ones that hold on to it
That's right.
and decide how we feel around it.
I'll leave you with one last thought. You can take someone in a wounded place and drop them in a wonderful, wonderful situation, and that situation, they won't be able to do anything with it until they change their minds. A famous piece of wisdom is attributed to Einstein. It's a very much older wisdom. We cannot solve the problems on the same level that they're created by. So we have to let go of the thoughts and our instincts that have created the certain situations we're in now. If we want to grow, find people who are in the situation you want to be, and instead of attacking them, reach out to them and say, hey, how did you do it?
Yeah.
How did you get where you are? I want what you got. I want to be where you are at. So teach me. How
Yeah.
can I learn from you? Instead of attacking people and tearing them down, build yourself up. No one has ever been built up from tearing someone else down.
Right.
So as a society, that's something that we need to really face with and learn. We are never going to get where we want to be by tearing each other down. So seek ways to build each other up. And sometimes that's a challenge. So I'm going to challenge you today. What's in your life that you can let go of that's in your way? And how can you show up better for yourself in your life? And I guarantee you others are going to benefit more for it.
Yeah.
So,
Work on yourself. It's the only way. It's the only way we're going to heal as a whole, as a society, is for each one of us to do the work. And that's and with support. We don't expect everyone to do it on their own. That's why Awaken is here. That is why Awaken is here, why I did this, why I built this, and why we're here now. So thank you so much. Have an awesome day.
and God bless you all. Thanks so much.